All right, welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. This is January the 27th, 2019. Almost my entire panel has ditched me. Matt's supposed to be here, but I don't know where he's at. But Rick is here. Rick didn't ditch me. So, hey, Rick, how's it going?
Good.
And I have Tyler Brown and Garrett. Help me out here.
Kopczynski.
Okay. And you guys are into LARPing. You have a company that does LARPs, live action role plays.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to talk to these guys about that today. And after that, talk about our usual geek stuff. Let's do introductions real quick. My name is not Matthew Carpenter. I don't know why I'm not here. And Matt edits books sometimes. So I'm doing his intro for him in case he decides to show up. Rick?
I'm Rick Lay, writer. Okay. And that's about it.
All right. Whichever one of you guys wants to go first. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Garrett Kopczynski. I'm one of the 3 co-founders at Reverie Studios. And I'm the lead writer and designer for Reverie Studios.
All right. Glad you could make it, Matt. I just introduced you. So. All right. So, okay, Tyler, how about you?
My name is Tyler. As Garrett said, I'm one of the founders of Reverie Studios. I do a lot of our production and logistics work. So I do the practicals, props, set decoration, that type of stuff. And I'm a nice sounding board for Garrett when he's got the new hotness.
Let's start with the basics. So what is a LARP? What is a live action role play? How does it work?
You want to field that, Tyler, or shall I?
You start.
Okay, sounds good. We'll just rotate as it makes sense.
Yeah.
So live action role playing is essentially a theater experience. What differentiates it from a traditional theater experience is that the audience is the very same as the cast. What's kind of, I guess, different about it is it's very much more organic. So there's no script necessarily. There's a lot of variation. You know, it's a very new art form in some respects. So I think it's still being defined as to what a LARP is. There's a lot of discussion within the community academically whether even that's a good term or whether they would like to look at other words for it. But at least for the time being, a LARP is roughly speaking, you have people that show up. They're playing characters. They don't necessarily have any script. And the event either has scripted scenes that happen or there's a sort of environment that's crafted and the participants sort of define it as they go along. Sometimes there's rules, sometimes there's not. It really depends on the style that you're doing as to how it's conducted. Some of them are continuous and they have like a campaign over a period of time. So it's like playing a tabletop role-playing game. You have consistent characters. Or sometimes they're just little artsy one-shots that are built around crafting an immersive environment, and you look to explore something about that story. So that's pretty much what a LARP is.
So I've never been a part of a LARP, although I've heard of them before. So I guess I'll ask some basic questions here, trying to picture it in my mind. Does a LARP usually happen at one location or multiple locations, or how does that work?
I would say the large, for the most part, most LARPs happen in one location. Participants will show up. They'll have an out-of-game area, a place where you are yourself. You are not in character, as the term would be. And then you travel to the in-character space. Most LARPs like to keep these very separate. So you have a place to be yourself if you want to sort of escape from being your character. But there are LARPs that travel through multiple locations. Last year, Garrett and I went over to help some friends of ours run a LARP in Berlin. And that was over like 12 or 13 different locations within the city. Of course, that LARP was very big. They had like 250 participants, so they could support that. If you only have 20, you kind of want to keep people a little bit more, keep them grouped up.
I was getting the impression during the video test that you guys have your own physical offices as well. Is that correct? Because you're there now, right, Tyler?
This is actually my my other worldly office.
Work.
Yeah, I'm an events manager, and I have my own office, and so I do a lot of my LARP other job work here too. So
we aspire to have an office one day.
Well,
we sure do.
You mentioned that during the second half of the show, you guys might stay, and it's possible that you've got a LARP running now. I think you said downstairs, and it's possible they might come up to you for help or something. So that's kind of where I got the impression. So they're using this space.
Yeah, I rent as an events manager. I rent like multiple locations inside of a very large building, and any client can come in and rent the space. And since the LARP that's downstairs is set during like the 1910, 1915, and our building was constructed right at that time, they sort of fell in love with it, and so they're here. But next week there's an orchestra here for the whole week, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so now that we kind of understand the basics, I'm sorry, Matt, did you have a question?
I just wanted to comment that regarding Lovecraftian LARPs, do you know of Aaron Vanek, the guy who's big into Lovecraftian film and at the HP Lovecraft Film Festival? He ran a LARP this year that started the morning before the program started and ran all the way up to the opening ceremonies, and they went to several locations over Portland. So this is something that we're seeing a little bit more of in the HPL type community.
Yeah, I'm aware of Aaron Vanek. I never met him, but you know, somebody that I'm familiar with. He's very involved in especially the academic community within LARP, which you find that there's a great amount of interest in researching what LARP means and how it can be used. But yeah, there is that developing interest. I think, so we were talking to Necronomicon, and they wanted us to run something in August of this year. So, you know, I definitely think there's a trend for folks wanting to try this out.
Yeah. I assume you were talking to Niels Hobbs.
I think so. That was maybe one of the folks that we were talking to. I can't remember exactly. It's part of their gaming division or their gaming group.
Well, just as an aside, I don't know if you guys have been to Necronomicon, but it is a blast. It's held every 2 years in Providence, and you know, around Lovecraft's birthday, that time frame. Tickets just went on sale. Just I think 2 days ago, Matt. I think on the 25th. And you can get those at necronomicon-providence.com for anyone listening that is interested in that and doesn't know about it already. Yeah, it's a blast. So I'm not surprised that, and Niels does a really, really great job. He has so many different things and events going at Necronomicon, and yeah, I'm not surprised he wants to add something like this. So that's great.
Yeah, it's really, LARPing has kind of been kind of fringe in the United States for a really long time. In Europe, it has been like it's a class schedule. You sign up for LARPing, like 5th period is LARP. Like so, but in the United States, it's kind of segregated into a very interesting place, I guess is where you could put it. But it is starting to get really big. Like last year, Disney announced that their new Star Wars, I don't even know what to call it, Star Wars world that they're doing is going to have a very, very heavy LARP influenced experience. Like it's actually built around that. You can drop $2 or $3 grand and show up and then be a character in the Star Wars world for like 3 days, because they know people are going to pay money for that. They've done more research than I can probably imagine. And they're not alone. They know where the trend is heading, is less from consumerism, less than buying like a new TV every year, and more of having these really fun experiences with your friends or family.
Yeah, Matt. Matt, you have a comment?
Okay, it's interesting because people can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did I freeze?
No, you're fine.
Okay, people have always liked to get dressed up in costume. I sort of view LARP as just the extension of, say, the Society for Creative Anachronism, where people like to get dressed up like knights and then have a real battle, or get dressed up in courtly garb and go to have a feast. It's very similar, except now there's perhaps more of a script that you're following to tell a story.
Well, and also, this is from the standpoint of someone who's never done a LARP and is getting most of my information about what LARPs are right at this moment. But, you know, it just seemed to me also a natural extension of, say, Call of Cthulhu role-playing, for example. You know, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's back when before I knew about LARPing, I was really into tabletop gaming, and I would always find myself getting up to act out what I was doing because it was easier than sort of just sitting there and explaining it. So our tabletop games would sort of drift around the room, right? They're like, well, where is everybody? Okay, well, move where you want to be in the room. And that's how, I mean, for whatever reason, we didn't know that you could buy little maps and do this, but it wasn't obvious to us at the time. But I was like a very exceptionally shy kid. So I had, and that was okay. But I always sort of dreamed of not being that. You know, you see the charismatic guy in the room who just draws everyone's attention, and everyone's like, "Oh, that guy's pretty cool," or you think what you think. But LARPing provided an outlet to sort of pretend to be the person I wanted to be in an environment that was safe. Everyone was buying in. I was portraying a character. It wasn't me. I could be a jerk. I could be a leader. I could be a follower. I could practice dark arts. I can do whatever I wanted. And you can't do that in society where people don't know what you're doing, right? So it was through LARPing that I sort of became the person that I kind of wanted to be, and in a safe way. It didn't happen overnight, and you definitely need everyone else's permission to sort of explore what you want to do. And I think it's just one of the best hobbies you can get into. So,
well, and it's interesting that you brought this up, that it actually helped you maybe move away from shyness somewhat, if I'm hearing you correctly. Yeah, that's a very healthy game to play if it's doing things like that. It's very easy to, I think, for some people to look at something like LARPing as, okay, well, only, you know, nerds do this that live in their parents' basements. But, you know, these same people don't look at going home every night and watching TV as something negative. You know, and this is something, LARPing is something where you're using your imagination, you're interacting with other people, and so on and so forth. So yeah. You guys have a Lovecraftian LARP coming up in April, isn't it, in Providence?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so you're still accepting applications from people for that, right?
That is correct. Yep. We'll probably be accepting applications up until, I would say, about mid-March.
Okay.
We haven't really defined our cutoff point, but that's the very, very latest, because it's much harder to plan travel if you're coming from outside Providence, let's say, to arrive and go to this event if, you know, you haven't really had some months in advance to like get your flight together and that kind of stuff. But yeah, about mid-March.
Well, I did link to your website on this in the show notes, But for anyone listening to this later and you're driving down the road, you can look at the show notes later. And also, it's Eschaton. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
EschatonLARP.com. EschatonLARP.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got it's got an application. It tells, it gives you a lot of information here. April 5th through the 7th, 2019. Talk about what all is included. I see that the base package starts at $875.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thought that hit my mind was, that's a lot of money. This must be really, really cool. They must really go all out.
This is true. Yeah, so a large part of what that cost is actually lodging and food. The best way to think about it is it's actually an all-inclusive package, very similar to if you were going to go on a cruise or something like that. You would want to just go and relax and enjoy the experience. So the base package has 2 nights at the Hilton Providence, which is a really nice hotel in downtown Providence, if you're familiar with it. And it also includes food during the time there, which is breakfasts, and then also catered meals at the location. And it also includes transportation from the hotel to the event site. The event site is Quantum Association, which we are extremely lucky to be working with them. It's it's a clam eating society, is that, or it's a clam eating club, is that right, Tyler?
Something like that, yeah. I think so.
So a bunch of very rich people at the time got together and built a clubhouse where they could, sit out together and have good times and drink and, I guess, eat clams. And it's right within view of Providence. And at one point, they used to have a rail line, like a private rail line that went out to this place. And it's gorgeous, and it's very much fitting the aesthetic of the sort of like Lovecraftian style universe. It's old and it's very New England. And then on top of it, there's a private island you can walk out to.
Wow.
So we have this amazing site that we're going to get for this LARP. And when you get the package, basically all you have to worry about is getting to Providence. And once that's taken care of, we'll handle the rest. And part of that, you get a bespoke character written for you, which is, I think part of the appeal is that you can actually envision something that is a fun experience for you, and we will write something for you that will have a rich background in history, and you'll have an opportunity to really experience this with a lot of fantastic people.
Well, it suddenly isn't that much money when you include lodging, catered meals. I'm looking at the list now. Each character is custom written and tailored to you. Pre-game workshops for you and your cult to immerse yourself directly into the game. After game parties, Saturday night and Sunday morning. Looks like you've got other upgrade options too.
We do. Yep.
Plus the other, the location sounds pretty cool as well. So yeah. Let me click over to your participant guide here on the website. Talk about what kind of characters that you're looking for to play the game, because I believe you mentioned to me the other day that it's a little bit of a turn, a 180 on, for example, Call of Cthulhu. In the LARP, you're playing cult members. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Talk about that for a bit.
Sure. So we, as a design studio, like to look for interesting experiences. And when we were looking at a larger scale LARP to do, we sort of explored some options and then landed on wanting to do something like this, sort of cosmic horror experience, because we enjoy very complex and difficult stories. And I think typically, especially with cosmic horror, you have the investigator or the person who is encountering the unknown. And it's a reconciliation with that, there's horrors out there, that the world is hostile and, could crush you like a bug if it so chose. We wanted to change that experience around and say, well, what about the people who would follow these kinds of deities? And we didn't necessarily want to lean into some of the more gory aspects, but just focus on the kinds of people that would become cultists if, they discovered that there were ancient gods. And we want to focus on exploring the humanity of those types of individuals, why they choose things, why they believe things, and then confront them with a very difficult choice. Eschaton is a word that sort of means the end of the world, right? It's very specific. It's, the apocalypse. It's, these beings are coming, right? The gods are going to come. And there are 5 cults with 5 ancient gods that we've written. Each of them has its own apocalypse, and one of them will happen, right? And part of the LARP is choosing and believing things. So while you may be in a cult, you don't necessarily have to stay in that cult. Basically, if you're a very rational person who has maybe encountered that the universe is hostile, you may hear about a different apocalypse and decide, actually, it would be better for all of us if that's what happened, right? And belief shapes the outcome. It's going to be the core dramatic narrative that all of these participants are exploring as these cultists. And some of the characters are going to be a little bit more on the sort of rational and emotional and humanistic side, and some of them won't be. And I think there's going to be that, fibrous web between those characters as they sort of push and pull around the stories that they're interested in telling. So that's largely what Eschaton is going to be about, is exploring choice and belief and being confronted with cosmic horror that lurks just beyond the corner.
It's pretty obvious that you guys are, you love cosmic horror. I can see that in the descriptions of the game and on the website. I love this. The apocalypse is coming and you're invited to make it happen. Eschaton is a LARP in the genre setting of cosmic horror, and will provide the sense that ordinary life is a thin shell over a reality that is so alien and abstract in comparison that merely contemplating it would damage the sanity of the ordinary person. This dark and mysterious event will drop you into the twilight hours of existence before the end times. I know Rick's got a couple of questions for you, and don't let me forget to ask. I'm really interested in finding out how you guys got into Lovecraft and cosmic horror in the first place. So, yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Garrett, you have some interesting paintings to your on your side wall there.
Yes.
Are those the gods worshipped by the cult?
No, so these are prints that were done by a very good friend of mine that I grew up with. His name is David Hoskins. He would be, probably over the moon that he had an opportunity to be featured. But no, he does this very great sort of dark illustrative art. And actually I think he's doing some work for a tabletop role-playing game called, oh goodness, I can't remember the name of it, but it's sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, but very stripped down back to like the original D&D. And he's doing some art for like an upcoming manual. So yeah, that's what all that is. That's not necessarily related to the LARP itself, but I studied Gothic horror when I was in undergrad, and I'm very much into horror as a genre. So I kind of surround myself with those things anyways.
Tyler, you were showing us some interesting masks before the show began. So if you could show our viewers.
Oh, sure. So here's apologize to our podcast viewers, I guess.
Go ahead, just describe it a bit. Yeah.
It's a mask. And it's what I envision sort of like a mix between like a Cthulhian creature and maybe a deep sea fish by chance. So it's got these nice ridges. It's got some fins. It's kind of like got like a gillish mouth here. So this mask is what this is one of the things that our participants coming to our event can do is they can come to us and they can say, you know, me and my friends, Sarah, we'll say, for instance, she wants to get sacrificed down on the ocean beach on an altar because that's how she wants her character feels is really important to do that. And we all think it would be a lot of fun. And I'm like, okay, well, what happens? They're like, well, it would be fun if a creature came out and ate her. We're like, not a problem. How about 9 o'clock? And they'll say, great. So we'll go back to our production place and I'll say, have this mask, and I'll give it to one of our assistants and they'll don some robes or whatever. And we'll set that stage for them. So part of this is us getting ready to do that. On the other hand, they could come and say, can we have some cool masks? Maybe we want to, you know, masks are a wonderful tool because they're one of the best ways of dehumanizing people is you put a mask on and suddenly it's a completely different person, right? So we could do that. Or I've got another one here I'm working on, which is this kind of, it looks like it's kind of leaning into Labyrinth, as what I mentioned earlier. It's got these giant horns.
Looks like it's leaning into Donnie Darko. Oh,
yeah. You get some nice rabbit ears going on.
I was thinking of Surtur from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Ragnarok.
Yeah. I started working on that. There's the giant skull, and there's a shield, and the chains wrapped up. A friend of mine who works for a prop company called Punish Props, he made one, and I got inspired. But these are all paper mache. You can see like the different layers. This is I was doing earlier today, so it's lighter than the other part. And we do all kinds of stuff like that. Well, torches, altars, fake, safe ritual daggers, fake blood, or things more mundane, which is like a large group of individuals want to have like a tea ceremony. And so we will help facilitate and make that happen too. So it's really whatever our job as facilitators is to make them have the best, most immersive experience possible. And it is a lot of fun to make this stuff happen for them.
Are the gods original to the game? I mean, do you use Cthulhu and Hastur, or do you use your own Cthulhuoid entities?
Garrett?
Great question. We chose to do Lovecraftian inspired. We use that term for a couple different reasons. One of which is there's a lot of mining of Cthulhu and Lovecraft in general that people have done, really exploring that mythos and writing a lot of stories within that context. We want to do something different. Cosmic horror adjacent to that, but very much original. All of the stuff is its own material. And then also we wanted to distance ourselves from the problematic aspects of Lovecraft and to really just kind of contextualize it within our own setting and make it very accessible to anybody. And to make these kind of original concepts that folks want to explore and feel somewhat familiar without having it be something that they can expect. So it's all new gods, all new cults, all of it is all original material, but it's very much similar. So we have that context for folks that really like this.
Could easily be a sub-mythos if you wanted to go that route.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a wise choice because people won't necessarily know what to expect, even being familiar with, the Lovecraft mythos. So.
Yeah, it's very true. It's a very good way to describe that would be people who watch movies who've already read the book. They have an expectation. They're like, I didn't really enjoy the movie of Lord of the Rings because they changed these parts around. They didn't do how it is, but it's its own medium. It has to be different, right? You don't want to just recreate an identical experience. You kind of want to explore and get into something that's different. And different can be okay.
I see what you're saying. I think that if you were using Cthulhu, for example, you'd possibly get a lot of complaints like, oh, you didn't really do the Cthulhu right. I was reading a website article, I forget where, the other day, and they were talking about why Aquaman is such a success at the box office, and that Shazam looks like it will be as well. And the reason why they came up with was because the audience is pretty familiar with Superman, pretty familiar with Batman. So if those two characters don't match up to their preconceived notions, then I mean, there's a lot of ways where expectations can not be met, you know, and that's not the case with Aquaman, for example. You know, he's
Well,
not really that well known.
Also, Jason Momoa, at least according to my wife, although I don't know why.
Yeah, he's
Probably his acting. Yeah.
Yeah, he's an attractive man. But yeah, you're to go with what you said. You're absolutely correct. You know, when you have a set expectation, and we also like you walk into a situation and you're like, it's going to be like this, and then you begin to build your experience or your sense of enjoyment around a conception that isn't really grounded in anything, because it involves a bunch of other people who all have their opinions as well. And I'm a big fan of sort of like reimagining, reinterpretation. It doesn't take anything away from the original material. Like, I love reading Lord of the Rings. I love the movies.
Right.
I can love them both. They can be different, right? You know, myths change as the storyteller interprets them. They draw attention to certain aspects. They diminish others. It's okay, as long as the core, this cosmic horror, is on point, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when you do a movie about Batman, you're kind of asking for it, because I heard a lot of comments after Batman v Superman, you know, that this isn't really Batman. This isn't how Batman really acts. Well, which Batman are you talking about? He's been around for what, 80 years now, give or take, and there's been a lot of different versions. I mean, Batman 66 is, in a sense, the real Batman too, as silly as it is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep. Yeah, you're not wrong. You know, it was like I remember the criticism. They were like, Batman doesn't kill people, and it's like, well, Batman's in a hard place right now. Like, he's been going through a lot of things, and we can't show that all in a film without it being like 6 hours. But just go with us. Go with the story that we're trying to take. I like the DC cinematic universe. I know a lot of my friends don't, because it's so very different than the comics that they read, and it's completely valid to not enjoy it. It's okay.
sure.
It's okay to have your own opinion about what you think about things, and other people thinking differently doesn't and shouldn't undermine that. It's kind of one of the big, like, sticky points for me in fandom is I'm right, and because I'm right and you have a different opinion, somehow this invalidates my opinion. It doesn't. So we like to do creative interpretations of that. And if you come in and have like an idea that you want to run with, and you're like, well, I think cosmic horror should really influence these type of events, that's great. Talk to us about it. We'll help execute that. We'll help bring your ideas to fruition. And maybe it's amazing, and it's like one of the best things that happen in the whole experience, and that's totally okay.
So how did the two of you get into cosmic horror and or Lovecraftian fiction?
Well, as I said, I was a undergrad literature student, and I think growing up, you know, I probably read some of the very familiar novels like Frankenstein or, you know, Dracula, those kinds of things. So it was always kind of there. It was, those stories interested me. You know, eventually, of course, I read Lovecraft, and, you know, it was an interesting variant of horror. You know, weird fiction and science fiction and those kinds of things I started to get into later through my undergrad. So academically, I focused on horror, why it exists, what it meant, why people were writing it so dominantly, you know, especially during the Romantic era, and what it said about society. And then, you know, of course, later iterations as things happened, like the Great War or, you know, other societal changes. So for me, you know, horror has always been, you know, something that I dipped my toe in, then really dove in. I really wanted to know as much as I could about why it is that horror is a genre. And it's been interesting for me to explore that now as a LARP writer as well. You know, talking about sort of why we tell horrific stories and why we're interested. It becomes very personal when you're portraying a character who's in the midst of horror. And I think it's a very powerful experience that can give you a lot of insight about, you know, things and thoughts and feelings. And I think that's why it has such a powerful hold in modern cultural context. So, you know, it's a very powerful force in my life, and it always has been since I was first really aware of it.
I want to ask Tyler the same question, but before I do, just so I don't forget to ask this, do you guys videotape your LARPs for later viewing, or is that never done, or a no-no, or what?
It depends.
It depends, actually. I know there's some companies right now who are really interested in doing, attempting to do that and figure out how to crack that. Last time we were talking with a company called White Wolf, who makes Vampire the Masquerade. They were very much attempting to figure out how to do that, how to stream a LARP and make it seamless and make it work. We're very big on a consent in our LARPs. If someone was like, I want to do this cool thing, I think it's exciting, but you're attempting to sort of interact with somebody else and get their buy-in, you can't make them do the thing. If they're, as a participant, are like, I'm not really interested in that for whatever reason, it's, you know, it's not about you and what you want. It's about their level of enjoyment. And everybody has that sort of agreement when you start. So one of the things could be is that someone is like, and I've seen this many times, like, for instance, a friend of mine, he's like, I'm a lawyer. I can't show up in a professional capacity in that I LARP. Is there anything wrong with that? No, but my potential clients aren't going to know that, right? I can't sit down and talk with them. I can't discuss them. I can't be photographed. I can't be on video. And so then you don't do it, right? The more people you add into the mix, the harder and harder it becomes to do that, unless the entire event is presented in a way in which signing up, you know that that is going to happen. Individuals coming to our event should know that there will be some photography that will happen. They should know that there will be some video happening, but they also have right of first refusal. So we will put all of our media up on a private place and say, is there anything that just jumps out at you as being like, oh, you being down on the beach drenched in blood is something you would maybe not want your kids to see you in, right? Or you're a teacher and that could get you fired. And we would naturally be like, absolutely, right? We'll have our photographers not use that as publicity material and move forward with there. So it would be wonderful if we could be the people to figure out how to make that work, but I don't really know if that's our racket just yet.
So same question for you, Tyler. How did you get into cosmic horror?
I took the long roundabout way. I didn't get into it until I was well into the weeds on what we had just mentioned, which is Vampire the Masquerade. I was a tabletop gamer for a long time, and when you play like Dungeons and Dragons, it doesn't get that deep. You know, okay, Ravenloft and whatnot is not really. It's kind of a little bit darker, but not super dark. It depends on who your DM is going to be. And then I got into Vampire the Masquerade, but even then, that's not often really deep. And there's a lot of conflicting or incompatible goals in LARPs like that. But I still dabble my foot in there. It wasn't until movies started getting me into them. I started watching, I watched In the Mouth of Madness with, was it Sam Neill?
Yes.
Yeah. That movie was kind of amazing for me. And the transformative events of where he's like, I'm the only one that remembers what reality used to be like, and now I'm the crazy person, right? Because everybody else is their idea of what reality is this other thing, and now I'm here, and just having him sit in the theater watching a movie of himself. And I was like, okay, so this can be a little bit something different. And just hanging out with Garrett has been
He corrupted you.
yeah. He's just like, hey, you need to check out this movie, or no, this is the movie you want to check into, because he has his finger on the pulse of that a lot more than I do.
Did you ever see a movie with Sam Neill called Possession?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
That's a wild Lovecraftian movie.
Yeah.
Also, just FYI, guys, since we're on this topic, I've got a big list of either Lovecraftian or Lovecraftian-inspired movies, cosmic horror movies, at the Lovecraft eZine website, lovecraftezine.com, and then just click on, I don't know what it says, Mike's list of favorite Lovecraftian movies or something like that. And starts with Absentia and goes from there. So
I will check it out for sure.
yeah, have you guys seen Absentia?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's a really good cosmic horror movie, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I think
my favorite film that has come out somewhat recently is Beyond the Black Rainbow, which in large part inspired some of Eschaton, because it was a very strange take on, I think, the Lovecraftian themes. And if you have not seen it, it is a slow burn, but it is amazing once it really hits that stride. And that director is going some places. I think they just did Mandy with Nicolas Cage, also a fantastic film. So yeah, it's definitely like the film that made Eschaton. So if you're interested in learning more, that's a good film to look at.
yeah, I will definitely check it out. I've heard that it's a really slow movie, and that's why I've not checked it out or watched it yet. But if there's a payoff there for the slow burn, then yeah, I'll definitely watch it.
Yeah, it's really, one of those things where I can't really recommend it to people because I don't want to be on the hook when they're like, it was terrible.
Right.
But I found it to be fascinating, especially when you do reach that part of the movie where like, what is going on? Where did this cult stuff come out of?
Yeah, what was that movie you recommended to me, Garrett, just recently that had, I think they're in a police station that's closing down?
Was it The Void?
I think it was.
Yeah, it was at a hospital. And that's very, very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, it is. That's probably my favorite cosmic, kind of like in that horror genre. My favorite horror movie outside of that would probably be It Follows in the last like 5 years.
That's a great movie.
We
had the Void guys on the show when they were doing their Kickstarter to fund the movie.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Movie. Yeah, I really liked it. I'm a big horror movie fan. I worked in I did production work in theater and film for like 10 years. So doing set deck, painting, props work, that kind of stuff. So very familiar with the industry. And even though I don't do that anymore, I still follow a lot of the production work that goes into that kind of stuff. And horror movies just have the best stuff always.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of It Follows. I'm glad you mentioned that. And although I don't think I've gotten around to putting it on my cosmic horror movie list yet. And my son watched it on Netflix, or started to watch it with his friends one time, and he's like, "Oh, Dad, this is really slow and dumb." I was like, "Okay, all right. Well, I liked it."
Well,
So,
it's one of those.
He looks at it as, "Oh, it's a nerdy dad film," but
it's one of those few horror movies that, like, in the first like 5 minutes, tells you everything you need to know. It's like, here's what's happening, go. And I really appreciate that. It's not that I don't mind trying to puzzle and figure things out. It's often I find a lot of the trouble in a lot of horror movies is they try to get too clever. And they're like, wait to the big reveal. And that's cool, but there's definitely something to be said to It Follows. And definitely having watched it in the theater was awesome if you understand like what the core concepts are behind it, which I'm not going to get into, but yeah, it was great.
Not to keep going off on movie tangents, but if you guys haven't seen The New Daughter, that's quite Lovecraftian, with Kevin Costner. It's a very, very good movie.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So,
Mike, since you're citing movies,
yes,
we could bring up, if you like to see a attempt to have a 1960s Lovecraftian television series, Dark Intruder.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Leslie Nielsen as an occult detective in 1890 San Francisco.
Was he absolutely like Leslie Nielsen, or was he?
This was when he was being serious.
Oh, okay, all right.
He was a straight man.
He was a straight man, because Forbidden Planet, Leslie Nielsen.
All right,
even though there are little comedic elements at times in the show, but it's got some. It had there's an article I have online that Mike posted. It had some Lovecraftian references that took me years to figure out what they were referring to.
That's pretty cool. I'll check it out.
On your team page, you write Reverie Studios was formed with the purpose of creating experiences that examine existential questions. That line really grabbed me. Will you guys talk about that? I mean, to start a company to examine those types of questions is a pretty powerful mission statement, you know.
Yeah, so our third co-founder, Ken, who's not here, this is also something where I think he would have a lot to say. His father passed away somewhat recently, and I think for him, he wanted to really explore, the dimension of thinking about what life means, to think about harder questions and concepts that we don't necessarily encounter in our day-to-day life. These are sorts of things that impact us in a very big way, but we don't spend a lot of time in our day-to-day life thinking about them. But we wanted to create experiences that did give people a safe opportunity to do that. So we wanted to write LARPs that people walk away from where they're thinking and examining and, really kind of going through some emotions or some thoughts that, perhaps would be otherwise inaccessible or difficult. In the way we do our LARPs, we focus a lot on consent, calibration, and safety. So there's a lot of immersion, but it's also, we keep in mind that these things will impact people. So that we do workshops before the actual LARP where we actually kind of get everybody in the same page to learn how to interact well with each other, but also to let everybody know that we're all friends, and we're going to go through this experience together. It may be emotional, but you're going to be safe. And, we do these workshops also after, because there's this concept known as bleed, where the life that you lived as a character can impact the life that you live as yourself, and managing that as part of that experience. So, at least from where I'm sitting, that's what that means, when we say we want to make experiences. And maybe Tyler can talk a little bit about it as well.
You hit it out of the park. I'm right on it.
I'm so impressed with how organized you guys are and how much detail and thought that you've put into this. Even like you said with the bleed and the closing workshops, that's something I would not have thought might be an issue, but since you mentioned it, yeah, I can see how it would be, or it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
knowing that is going to be part of it, it enables people to sort of like portray characters that are not nice. We all interact people who are less than pleasant from time to time. And if you have this sort of idea that people are going to judge you as an actor or as a participant by your character, no one would do it, right? Or everyone would be like these nice, happy people who get along and are good friends with everyone around them. And the main aspect of story is conflict. There has to be characters that want something different, and there is your story. at its base. So knowing that when you come into a room after the event has happened and after we have stopped portraying these characters and now we're going to start being ourselves again, and you can sit down and talk and you can say, I know me, know the person, and be aware of like, I was a horrible jerk. Remember when I like stopped you from doing the thing that you really wanted to do? I was super sympathetic of your plight, of what you wanted to do, and that transitionary time of leaving the event and coming back into you is very, very important. We don't want people to leave with hard feelings. You know, you want people to remember very fondly the struggle that they had during the event.
Well, it's really obvious to me that anyone who joins one of your LARPs is going to have a great time because of, as I said, all the detail and preparation that you've put into this. Again, you know, pretty much everyone listening to this is a fan of cosmic horror. So if you'd like to do this Lovecraftian LARP, I've got the link in the show notes. And yeah, that amount of money does sound like a good deal when you see how much is included. You know, you don't have to worry about food, anything like that. So from that, leaving that aside for a second, I do think you guys deserve as many people participating in this LARP as possible because it just sounds cool as hell. But leaving that aside for a second, what would you guys recommend to people who want to start a LARP in their own town? How would they start? What advice can you give them? Or is there a reference that you can point them to? Anything like that?
It's a good question. It may be that there are already LARPs that they don't know about. And there are resources. There are a great deal of databases that are out there. LARPing.org is one of them. Some folks run that we know. And, you know, Facebook has a number of different groups that can be regional. So, you know, you can certainly find a LARP that may already be running.
And there's only a matter of time before someone writes LARPing for Dummies.
Well, I think there are some books that are out there. Leaving Mundania, which is by a good friend of ours, Lizzie Stark. We recommend people read that if they want to know more. She's a journalist professionally, and she explored LARPing. And now she is a LARP designer. And, you know, I'm working with her and a hero of mine, Jason Morningstar, who in 5 minutes I have a call with them to work on LARP. So when I leave, that is what I'm going to do next. But Leaving Mundania is a really good book if you want to read about, you know, learning more about this new art form. And I think, you know, the only recommendation I would have, you know, for somebody who wants to design their own LARP is, now, certainly read a little bit about it, but also remember that innovation and ingenuity and creativity lead to great things. The style of LARPing that we try to practice is called Nordic. And Nordic LARPing is immersive and has no rules. And, you know, fundamentally, it's sort of like a Turku, you know, or Dogme. Like, it's a style of running a LARP. And it was, from my brief understanding of it, because I'm not Nordic, I'm not European, but this is a dominant style in Europe. They started this because they saw what we were doing in the United States with our kinds of LARPs. And I said, that looks cool, let's do it. But they changed some of the rules, right? They were like, let's do this and that instead, because they didn't really know. They were just kind of making it up on the fly. So sometimes that leads to great things. So people should just embrace the passion and like think about what they want to see. And I think that's the fundamental lesson I've learned. Is just be unafraid of creating.
Matt, you had a question?
Yes. So I looked back at your past calendar. Are all of these one-time events, or do you repeat these in different locations? Because this could be saying this is the one time only you can do this.
We often write repeat events. So these were just rerunnings of the same LARP. We have a number of different ones. We have one right now called A Cog in the Machine, which is excellent. You should read about it. And we are running that at Intercon S, which is in Warwick, Rhode Island, in about a month. And this is a big LARP festival, basically. It's a big conference full of LARPs. And we're rerunning this particular LARP, which we've run now twice before.
Yep.
All right. You have to go, right, Garrett?
That is correct. Tyler may stay.
All right, Tyler can stay.
I'll stick around.
Yeah, Garrett, just real quick for your phone call. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for talking with me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and you guys are excellent, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, Tyler, anything you want to add to that? Or did you hear most of it?
For starting your own LARP? Yeah. I would say the first thing for me would definitely be getting a group of people together and figuring out what you want to do. Like, what type of stories are interesting? What level of immersion do you want to do? Do you want to incorporate familiar elements? Maybe everyone is tabletop games to an extent. Maybe character sheets are something that you want. Maybe they're not what you want. Just try to set appropriate expectations amongst the group, and then not be afraid to sort of dump everything when you have an experience and say, you know what, I didn't like this part of this. This fate made me feel not good. And follow the what feels better, and trust your instincts as a gamer, as a fan of the material that you want to try and participate in, and trust in that. The folks who come up with LARPs and all that kind of stuff, like you will definitely make mistakes, but just try to focus in the beginning on the people and not a goal. And I think that will begin to sort of bleed through everything else that you do, and you will attract more and more people to the type of thing that you want to run. Material aside, because you could run a LARP about anything. You can run a LARP for garbage men. You can run a LARP for sitting in an office and typing at computers, or you can run a LARP for an adventuring guild that hangs out in a tavern and tells tall tales. You can do whatever you want, and the story can be engaging and fun. And for me, I think that's your basis for if you want to start a LARP, and you want to explore this hobby. That's what I'd say.
Okay. Well, thanks. Are you going to stick with us while we talk about other things?
Yeah,
or do you need to run.
No, my next meeting, which Garrett will also be at, is at 8 o'clock. So I got a little bit of time.
Okay. So you got about an hour. It's 7 your time, isn't it? Thanks, Garrett.
Yep. Yeah, I got a little bit of time, but I got to also, I'll likely be around for maybe like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, because then I'm going to have to go downstairs and help out said clients.
Okay, no problem. Did you guys see the trailer for Velvet's Buzzsaw? I think I might have talked about this a little bit last.
We talked about that last week. It was something with paintings coming alive.
Yeah, it looks really good. Jake Gyllenhaal. Anyway, it's almost here. It'll be on Netflix on February 1st. So if you're interested in that, there's a date for you.
Is there any comment that it might be related to Hickman's model or any riff on it?
Not that we could tell from the trailer.
Yeah, but it sure reminded me of.
Yeah, I thought of Pickman's model too, but
yeah.
But it could tie into Dorian Gray for all we know.
Yeah. So after the show last Sunday, I watched a movie called The Limehouse Golem, which is on Hulu. For you to watch on Hulu. Have you guys seen that? It's not supernatural horror. It's set in London in 1880.
Sounds like a serial killer movie.
It is.
Yeah, I think I read a synopsis of that. Limehouse was the Chinatown region of London.
Yeah, I think that's right. And anyway, it definitely surprised me. It didn't go where I thought it would go. And I mean that in a good way. So I recommend that movie. Again, it's not supernatural, but if you consider serial killers horror, then it's definitely horror. And I really like that lead actor, Bill Nighy. I don't know if I'm saying his name.
I know who you mean.
Yeah, Nighy. Yeah, great actor.
He was in the Van Gogh episode of Doctor Who as the art curator.
Right. He was uncredited too.
Yeah, and he was in those vampire movies.
Underworld.
The Underworld. He was in the first.
That was him. That's right.
Yeah,
he was in the first Underworld.
Yeah, what great mannerisms he had of like these weird noises and clicking noises he would make of like an individual who was like 2,000 years old would clearly have this alien mannerisms about him. That was the favorite part about that movie. That I thought, how he would just sort of like cough in weird directions, and you were like, oh yeah, this guy is ancient. Very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Tyler. I've said this before on the show that a lot of books, stories, and movies that portray beings that have been around for hundreds or thousands of years portray them as acting just like, a 40 or 50-year-old might act.
Yeah.
They'd be so, I don't know if above is the word, but maybe immune to all that. They definitely act way differently, and they'd have a lot different sense of perspective than someone that's been alive for 35 years, or even 70 years.
It's true. Like you would like, I will outlive my problems.
Yeah.
Like why would I act rashly? I've been alive for 2 millennia. Like why? This is not a problem I need to address this year. You know what I mean? But for the sake of movie magic, you gotta have your troubles and your challenges, and they gotta move forward, and that's the nature of the medium. But that was the first thing and the biggest thing I remember about that movie was the way he acted, and he did a little bit of that in Pirates of the Caribbean too. He was what's his name?
Davy Jones.
Davy Jones. Yes, he was. And he still had that sort of like, how he would pucker his lips and do all that kind of stuff. He seems like he likes that kind of thing.
Did you ever read the vampire novels by Barbara Hambly? This is going way back. Those Who Hunt the Night. One of her things that was like an underpinning of the whole setting was all the time that vampires had, and what did they do with it? And how did they salvage themselves from boredom? And how many of them just sort of expired because of ennui? And to see a 600-year-old vampire is practically unheard of.
Yeah, at some point you would imagine you would become detached from everything around you. You gain that perspective how temporal all of these concerns are, and how asinine, someone, I'm concerned about this one little political thing, and it is the most important thing in my life. And yet, for these type of beings, it must be really hard to relate. Like if you're 40 years old and you're dating a 22-year-old, it's already a challenge, right? Like even with a 20-year age gap, it's hard to relate. Now, exponentially magnify that by adding on an extra 1,000 years. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
It's hard enough with teenage kids.
In the Watchmen comic book, this isn't exactly the same, but Dr. Manhattan is detached for a different reason, even though he's not all that old yet, relatively speaking. But someone asks, what was Adrian's Ozymandias, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked him, like I think it was a reporter asked him, something along the lines, it's been a while since I read it, but you're friends with Dr. Manhattan. Which way does he lean politically or something? The question was of that nature. And he replied, well, which do you prefer the politics of, red ants or black ants? So, to illustrate that Dr. Manhattan was just way above those types of things.
Yeah, and to go back to that a little bit, I like how he's like, I'm going to stop you, and then it's like, oh wait, you're right. Like,
yeah,
just completely removes the human aspects of it to a point. But actually, if Ozymandias to say something about his character, he's still a dude, and he still came up with it, and you're resonating with the person who doesn't have any sense of self or like that awareness.
Yeah.
Are you guys looking forward to the HBO series?
I am, as long as they don't Fahrenheit 451 it.
I don't know. I didn't care so much for the movie.
Get out.
Compared to a comic book, it's one of those things. It's like, I know it's a different medium, and I thought Jackie Earl Haley Jr. was perfect in his role, but I just had it was just different to the point where what struck me about the comic didn't strike me about the movie. I don't know. It's just me.
I like them both personally.
I do too.
Yeah,
I saw the movie before Matt gave me as a gift a copy of the graphic novel.
Yeah, I liked them both too. I'm going to give it a shot for sure. I mean, they're putting money down for it. Anything that has like, you start drifting into like 100 million budget for your production, and I'll go, all right, I'll check out an episode or two, just to see what the talk is about. And I'll see if I stick with it or not. We're in the golden age of television right now.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much good television that even among close circles of friends, you're not all watching the same thing.
Just be careful that the amount of money they're putting down, that's not the lens we're looking through, because in the entertainment, well, remember the movie Cleopatra? Just because they spent $60 million or some preposterous sum, the sum was much less than the parts.
Oh, it so often is.
Again, I was really looking forward to HBO's version of Fahrenheit 451, which is one of my favorite books. And man, it's like the writer, director, somebody just thought, how can I screw this up in the best way possible and piss off Ray Bradbury fans at the same time?
Yeah,
man, they sure did it. But all that said, yeah, I am looking forward to it. I do like Jeremy, who's playing Ozymandias?
Jeremy Irons.
Jeremy Irons, I do like him.
He's great.
I think he's a good choice for that character. Made me think of his character in The Man with the Iron Mask. That's sort of the puppet behind the scenes type character.
The puppeteer, you mean?
Puppeteer, I'm sorry. Yeah, the puppet. The puppeteer behind the scenes. Yes, thank you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So anyway, there's that, and then there is a new, I guess, superhero series coming out, or maybe it's a limited series called The Boys on Amazon Prime. Have you guys seen anything about this?
I have. I've read that comic, actually.
I just found out it was a comic today. How are the comics?
They are you familiar with Preacher?
I'm familiar.
I am very familiar with Preacher.
Yeah.
I was going to say Rick more so, I bet.
As the comic, I didn't watch the TV series.
Yeah. The show is actually pretty good. But in the way in which I don't know what's the right word. Heretical isn't the right, blasphemous. That Preacher is.
That's why I didn't watch the TV series.
Yeah, it's intense. They definitely toned it down a little bit for the for the TV show a little bit. But The Boys is like that for superheroes. It basically plays with the concept idea of if you had crazy superpowers and you are an average dude, are you going to what are you going to be like? Are you going to suddenly aspire to be this noble hero, or are you going to be just as petty and selfish as anybody else in the average world might be? Only now you have godlike powers. And so the general concept is that there's a group of like these 5 or 6 people who are not really super powered, but their job is to like either blackmail or keep in line superheroes from just doing whatever deviant nonsense stuff that they want to get up with, and try to keep that under wraps, lest the general populace just lose their mind if they really knew like what the superheroes did behind the closed doors. And it is an intense comic that pulls no punches, and neither of those comics in 1,000 years that I ever think would be on television, and yet here we are. So
the thing is, it is a golden age of TV, and there's so many mediums and TV shows coming out that it's good for the viewer, because I think it starts to force them to be written and directed as well as possible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's another TV show they can watch.
What's fascinating to me is when I was a kid, there were 3 divides. There were actors who were strictly Broadway, there were actors who were strictly film, and actors who were in television. And you might aspire to go from Broadway to film or cross over, but if you went to TV, it was like a black hole. You never got out of the TV and were never considered for feature films.
Mm-hmm.
And we have come around to the point where actors are doing commercials, reality shows, and Netflix just accrued a Best Actor, Best Movie nomination for one of their works. So I think it's just they now have such a pool of talent available as well.
Yeah.
It's made a difference.
Well, you had the ability back in the old television days. If you were a young actor, you could make it in television and make it in the movies. Steve McQueen would be probably the best example I could think of.
Yeah, you get Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu. They changed the game, right? They said, okay, television isn't television anymore. In the last 10 years, it's turned into something. You weren't bound by TV ads, or there was no outside influence. You could just tell a story that you wanted to. And that was sort of one of the things that movies had going for it, was you could have an action movie, but you could have dramatic elements in that, right? And when they were like, well, our TV shows can be however long we want. And actors, like, ask any actor these days who does movies and stuff, they can't wait to get on a hit TV show because it gives them range. Like, yeah, I can be in a 2-hour action movie, but it doesn't give me the opportunity to show emotion, right? Because they expect a certain persona from this, this not bothered by anything that could swing my way.
Yeah. Is that my?
Next week.
Amy Adams is one of the hottest actresses out there right now, and she just did a miniseries for HBO called Sharp Objects, which I'm going to watch with my wife because she said the book was really good. And then she's going to go right back to making great movies, I assume. Jake Gyllenhaal, we were talking about Velvet Buzzsaw. He just did a movie for Netflix. So yeah, they're very interchangeable these days. They don't care as long as it's good.
Yeah,
it's a good part for them.
Yep.
And I assume the paycheck is there for them too.
Well, look at the Lord of the Rings on Amazon right now. Like, I think, what was it, $1 billion they spent? I think.
God, yeah.
That's how much they spent for their show, for the material and the production. They're dropping $1 billion.
Well, Amazon can afford it. Netflix is they're running off a cliff. I mean, they need to do something drastically because they keep borrowing money to stay in business.
Well, they do also bring in $140 billion every month. So, well,
Yeah.
wait, hold on. Yeah, I think that's right. Yes. So them dropping money everywhere. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it could be, no, it's 140 million. I'm sorry, I'm off by 0. Is how much they just bring in subscription fees. So
yeah, I've just read several articles that basically says that Netflix is spending more than it's bringing in.
yes, that is absolutely correct right now, in an attempt to ward off like everybody and their brother is getting into the streaming service right now. So you've got Disney, you've got all the channels, and they all think that the consumer is going to, like, the consumer left cable because it was $100 a month, and they wanted to spend 20, right?
Right.
But so now you're like, but now everybody wants you to spend $20 for their content, and so everyone's pulling their stuff off of Netflix. So Netflix is wisely understanding. They're like, well, we really need to have our own content to keep people here, because all of the TV shows, the movies, and like Warner Brothers is like, well, they're pulling theirs now because they just got bought by Disney, right? So that's going to go on their streaming service.
This actually leads me to a mini rant. It's like, I don't have the wherewithal to subscribe to 30 different services. I am incensed by the private CBS channel that CBS that is doing the Star Trek episodes. I'm a big Star Trek fan.
Mm-hmm.
I already have cable. I don't want to spend extra dollars to get this CBS streaming service as well, and that's why I haven't seen Titans either.
You're completely correct. And that's the problem. Like everybody sees that Netflix money that they're making, right? And they want that, and they go, well, we have our own IP, we have our own material, so we're gonna, instead of licensing it to someone else and then making pennies on the dollar, let's make the whole dollar. But what they're not factoring in so much is exactly what you just said. It's like, I'm not going to have 6 or 7 streaming services because I don't want to start spending $100. That's why I left cable. So they're all going to be dead in a year or two, for the most
Assuming that you don't have cable, that a person doesn't have cable,
part.
you've got the big 3. You've got Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Netflix. Well, first of all, Amazon Prime, you get a lot more than just viewing movies and TV shows. You also get free delivery on things that you buy from Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And that really does pay for itself.
Sure does.
That's not something you're getting with Netflix and Hulu. Now, I got DC Universe because I wanted to watch Titans, and I've got the CBS one because my wife and son are really into Criminal Minds, and there's a show or two that I like on CBS. So it's actually cheaper than for them to buy the Criminal Minds episode every week, and watch it.
Yeah.
Because believe me, those two are not going to wait until it gets on Netflix to watch Criminal Minds. But I guess my point is this. I'm only going to spend that money outside of the big 3. I'm only going to spend that money on the services that interest me, like DC Universe, for example. I'm not going to go out and get CBS, ABC, NBC. I'm not going to go out and get them all. I'm just not. So there's that to think about too.
But there are these sort of shows that you're on the borderline of wanting. Like I would love to see the DC channel to get the Young Justice continuation. But I would probably watch Titans. But I'm doing too much. I went into Star Trek, and that was more important to me than Titans.
Well, Titans is sort of an anomaly because it's not available anywhere else. But let's say Criminal Minds was on NBC, and we didn't have the NBC access, whatever it is. I don't have to get NBC. I can buy the season from Amazon.
Yeah.
I can go one at a time and buy something, just like if I'm renting a movie. Like we used to go and rent a movie at the video store. Now you basically can go to Amazon and rent it for 48 hours, buy it. Rent it, and then you can watch it, and then it's returned automatically.
Or you can buy it if it's
Yes.
The digital. I find it's cheaper to buy digital than buy DVDs. And if I really like something like Avengers: Infinity War, I got on digital.
Yeah, because number one, I'm absent-minded, so I'm never gonna lose it, and I'm never gonna scratch the DVD. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. If you want to know where the trends is, as you follow Disney. I mean, they're starting their own streaming service. I'm going to get it because I want to watch their Star Wars stuff that they're going to be coming out with, and I'm going to want to watch the Marvel superhero stuff that they're going to come out with. They were like, they had me at Loki TV show. I'm like, okay, all right. I was like, yeah, okay. And then they were like, how about actually the Winter Soldier and
Falcon.
What's his name?
The Falcon.
Falcon TV show. And I'm like, what? I didn't know I wanted that, but sure. Right.
And
so
lady, let's not forget Lady Sif.
Yeah, she's going to be in it too. And I think it's coming into the Loki show. But also we've got Scarlet Witch and all this other stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And they understand. That's why they bought Warner Brothers. That's why Comcast was in the run to try to buy Warner Brothers. And there was this huge bidding wars because content is king right now. Like they got so many franchises from that, and they're going to pull it all, which is why all the Marvel Cinematic TV show universes is leaving Netflix. They're going to pull everything from Netflix. They want to either be the new Netflix or they want to be the Netflix thing that is the accessory to Netflix. You get Netflix and then you also get them, right? So
who owns Harry Potter? Is that Warner Brothers?
Yes.
Oh.
I'm actually a little PO'd at Netflix lately because I tend to watch more things on Hulu and Amazon Prime, and there's kind of a silly reason for it, but it's still valid. When I flip through Netflix and I land on something, I can't just read about it. It's gotta play one of these trailers, and there's no way to turn that off.
I hate that.
I can't stand that, and I'm just amazed. I don't think I've chatted with anyone or seen on the internet where people actually like that.
No.
I kind of figured that out, Mike. It's almost like you have to hover over it in a certain way, and then it'll give you a 2-line description. Because that bothers me too.
You should have to do that though. That's the thing. It's like I don't want to go to my home screen and have whatever it is they are deciding that I should know about a video start. Like I finish watching a show and I get done and I look to my wife and we're talking about it and we end it because we don't want to, and then it goes back and now it starts playing something over a conversation. Like, come on, right. Netflix. You got to stop that. You got to stop that now.
Yeah, and they're not really paying attention to that.
Their big problem is I can't find anything on Netflix. There's so much stuff that I can't find relevant things anymore.
Their interface is really bad.
Yeah, it's gone downhill.
There's too much of this. Watch this because you watch this lines. Well, can't I just look at the horror section, look at the sci-fi section, that kind of thing? Anyway, moving on. Speaking of TV, Clive Barker, this is from Bloody Disgusting. It's a headline from 2 days ago. Clive Barker updates on Nightbreed TV series. We're putting the team together. So that could be cool. That could be interesting. I don't see where it's going to be yet. Maybe they haven't gotten that far. But were any of you guys fans of the original film?
I caught some of it.
I'll take that as a no. You guys are staring at me lengthily when I talk about Nightbreed.
Nightbreed's a little sort of like the X-Men. Instead of being mutants being persecuted, it's monsters.
That's true. That's very true.
I think the one thing that turned me off about it, they had this character who was persecuting the monsters, and they called him Eichmann, which to me was being too blatant a Nazi reference.
Yeah.
Be a little more subtle.
Yeah. Did they remake that as a movie here, like 4 or 5 years ago? Was that a thing that happened?
I don't think so.
No, I might be misremembering something. I might be thinking of something else.
Okay, so anyway, there's that. All right, so did you guys see Glass yet?
No, not yet.
No, I haven't even seen Unbreakable or.
Oh, you haven't seen Unbreakable?
I haven't seen Split.
Rick, you got to watch Unbreakable. That's great. That's a good movie.
Split was good too.
Split was good.
Not as good as.
Yeah,
but
not as good as Unbreakable, and certainly not as good as everybody was saying it was. But James McAvoy did a hell of a job.
He sure did. He made that movie. He made the movie. Without him, it would have not has been nearly as enjoyable.
Yeah, and I hear he does the same in Glass, which is the number 3 in this trilogy. I guess I'm reading. I haven't seen it yet. Audiences are kind of split on it. Some people love it, and some people hate it. So,
I hear if there's a problem, it's the way it ends. That's what I get from reviews.
Oh well, I don't want to know, but Rick, you definitely should watch Unbreakable and then Split. So,
yeah.
Maybe after I finish Peaky Blinders.
There you go. You got a lot of TV in front of you. That's the best thing, though. It's the best thing when you find a new TV show and you're like, this is amazing, and then you look and you go 6 seasons, and it's just happiness.
Well, there are 4 seasons of Peaky Blinders, but there are only 6 episodes in each season.
You know what? This is another thing that stuck in my craw so bad. My wife and I like to watch period pieces. So
is this going to be another Get Off My Lawn speech?
Yeah, basically. So
okay.
We stumbled onto Foyle's War, a police detective working in Hastings during the Second World War, and just solving crimes. And it's very, very good attention to period detail. The character's very appealing. We're down to like the last 4 or 5 episodes, 7 episodes, I don't know. It goes off Netflix. So like I hadn't finished it. They finished it for me. And I didn't want to spend the money to get the last few seasons on Amazon. It just ticks me off, you know. I guess this is all part of this thing you say about content migrating off.
So I accidentally made a very controversial post on Twitter and Facebook the other day. And it went something like this, because my wife and son make fun of me for this. And so I thought, okay, let's see how many people are on my side on this. And the answer was basically nobody. And what I wrote was, cereal. Do you pour the milk in before or after? Because I pour the milk in before. And, you know, I think some of the comments were, what kind of monster are you? You know, things like that. So, so does nobody out there feel my pain? Do you not pour the milk in before? Because scientifically, it makes more sense.
Okay, Mike, have you ever read Neil Stevenson? Time and Age.
It's been a while.
His books are doorstops, which make them difficult. But he wrote this really marvelous book called Cryptonomicon, set back in the time of World War II, further back than that, going into the present. And one of the things he does is there's a whole section devoted for how one character eats his Captain Crunch.
Are you serious?
And how the milk has to be a certain degree of coldness, and you have to add the milk in various different measures so the cereal does not get soggy. and the cereal and the milk have to hit your tongue at different times to get the appropriate crunch and pleasant explosion of flavor. It goes on for like a page and a half of how you properly eat at Captain Crunch, and that's what I thought of. So,
No, I'm not that anal, but if you pour in a little bit of cereal on top of the milk, your crunch is going to last longer. You know, I don't pour in the whole bowl of cereal that I want to eat. I pour it in a little bit at a time.
Well, I'm on the minority because I don't mix milk and cereal.
Oh, yeah.
I drink it separately.
Well, my sister posted in that thread on Facebook a picture of a bowl. I didn't know this was a real thing, and it had a split down. It had a little wall down the middle of it. On one side, the person had their cereal, and on the other side, they had their milk. So they would spoon the cereal into the milk, and so they never had to worry about sogginess. So she said yours for only $4.99 on Amazon. So yeah, I just it was a lot more controversial than I thought it would be. So if I haven't bored everybody into not listening anymore,
yes. What does this have to do with Cthulhu?
It has nothing to do with Cthulhu at all. Maybe it does have something to do with madness, perhaps, and insanity. So I bet you Avathos takes his cereal that way. Oh, I'm sure he does. If anybody out there, I'm looking for, and they're surprisingly hard to find, I'm looking for books or stories with these three themes. Not all three, that would be pretty much impossible, but these are the three themes I'm looking for in a book. I think doppelgangers are pretty creepy. Paul Tremblay's recent book, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, there's a doppelganger in there. Paul talks about that movie that you don't like, Matt, that faux documentary about set in Australia, about the girl who dies, and I can't remember the name of it. But you said you didn't think the parents were emotional enough. Does that ring a bell?
This is what we had one Saturday night, right?
Yeah. I think Matt's in his own little world right now.
No, Mike, I'm lagging. I didn't quite hear the question.
That faux documentary about
the girl drowning.
The girl drowning. You thought the parents weren't.
Yeah, that Australian TV
Yeah, I'm trying to
show.
remember the name of it. Really, really good movie.
I will dispute, but don't remember the title.
Okay, well, anyway, that's another good example of a doppelganger story. Deja Vu, I'd like to see that well done in a story or novel. And then solipsism would be good too.
Did you ever read Ramsey Campbell's The Scar, a short story about doppelgangers?
I don't think I have. The Scar?
The Scar. I have it, I think it was in Height of the Screen. Either that or in Demons by Daylight. It's one of the early Arkham House ones.
Okay.
It probably was reprinted in later anthologies.
All You Zombies had a possible solipsism theme right at the end there, if you remember. And right now I'm reading Permutation City. I don't know if you guys have read that or not. It's a sci-fi novel, virtual reality. And I'm starting to suspect that might be a theme, though we'll see if I'm right or not. So any suggestions, email them to me, lovecraftezine@gmail.com. Rick, Matt, is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, just briefly, since going back to our show with F. Paul Wilson, there was a short story in his Secret History of the World that we were trying to figure out the title of, and I later posted it's ICU. It's in that collection he has on Amazon that has the weird name that begins with an E. The one that's sort of like a hodgepodge of his thoughts.
I don't know.
Sort of like Ephraim Rada. We'll just say it's like EPHEMRATA, some name like that. I just read that. It's by his own admission a minor piece of work, but if you're completist, you want to get that. On a more entertaining issue, I did finish Panacea, the first in his Ice trilogy, and that's excellent.
Okay.
It has a Robert E. Howard connection.
And Michael DeBronzo just put on the live feed that movie was Lake Mungo. Paul Tremblay and I were talking about that. That we both really like that movie. And Matt Carpenter doesn't, so he yelled "Get off my lawn" at that one too.
I liked it, but I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I mean, I thought it was a good movie. I don't think it was.
Okay.
You can go on, Matt.
I guess my final comment. I didn't like it, so my final comment for the show would be, I think they've already sold out the block of rooms at the Biltmore for Necronomicon. So if you're thinking about going, you may. This is very unusual. This convention must have just ticked up in popularity. It used to be you could call like a week before and get a hotel room. But if you're interested in going, you may want to check the Omni now. Just to set aside a reservation, you can always cancel it. But if you're thinking that you may go, you may want to go ahead and get your room reserved.
Yeah, well, the hotels do tend to get booked up before all the tickets are sold. Usually not this fast, but
not in a week.
Yeah, but that's a good point.
Because I've been debating whether I'll be able to go or not.
Well, having done a couple of this and having to actually do room blocks for the event I'm doing right now, they will expand often room blocks. So what you want to do is because whatever you say you want, you're like, oh, we'll take 100 rooms, but you only book 80, you're on the hook for 100. So you try to keep that window as close to what you think you can sell. So we may be surprised to see in another 4 or 5 days, they go, oh, we opened up 20 more rooms at the hotel, the Biltmore. And then they'll sort of stagger that out. Or they could be completely sold out too.
Yeah. The other thing is poor Neil was affected by the government shutdown. His job was on hold and he was slowly going broke. So he may have had other things on his mind over the last week, say.
Yep.
I'm sure he did, yeah.
Now, are those two separate hotels, or are they?
They're separate.
They're separate. They're like 2.5 blocks apart.
Yeah, they're not far from each other.
So the
Biltmore is the older hotel that Lovecraft liked personally, and the Omni is a newer hotel. I don't know how new, but
that's where the dealer's room is. Right?
Yeah. So typically, what they've been doing is the live performances, like the live radio plays, the Eldritch Ball, poetry readings and stuff, have been at the Biltmore, while the academic panel, like where they actually presented scientific papers, and the vendors were to a larger degree at the Omni, and now they put all the vendors at the Omni. The gaming was at the Biltmore, and I don't know where it's going to be this year.
Yeah, I've always ended up with a room at the Omni.
All right. Well, next Sunday is the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
So I'm not sure if we're going to have a show or not. That's kind of up to you guys, if you guys want to do a show or not. I'm not a football fan, so I'm fine with doing one if you guys want to. Of course, we won't have a guest, but we usually find plenty of things to talk about. So
I I don't want to alienate any potential interested fans, but I'm from Boston, so go Patriots. I know the rest of the country is rooting against us, but
well, it's like being on my side a Yankee fan. So it's like everybody wants you to lose.
Yeah, I mean, Boston. It was great meeting you.
Well, it used to be that you hated Belichick, but you liked Brady, and then after that whole Inflategate controversy, it kind of made you hate everybody.
Yeah. I like to focus on the fact that you can be fans of a sport, and be happy that you can have camaraderie on that level, and don't worry about the teams. Yeah.
Yeah. We're fans of Lovecraft, and we understand his extreme failings.
Yep,
that's true.
Yep. It wasn't the holier than thou, Lovecraft. It wasn't your honorable Lovecraft. He was just a guy, right? So
right.
Exactly. Well, this is how plugged I am, and I am to sports. I don't even know who's playing in the Super Bowl. So,
well, it's New England, and I'm trying to think who's.
Well,
yeah, I forgot who the other team is.
Really care who's playing in
the Rams. Yeah, Los Angeles is in there.
Well, anyway, hey Tyler, thank you so much for being on the show.
Nice chatting with you.
Yes,
really great to meet you.
Let us know about if you have an event planned to go concurrently with Necronomicon.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, if we if we run something, and I think that is what is going to happen. Garrett's sort of running the football, on that conversation right now. But if we do, we could come back and tell you all about it. If you'll have us for the event, which will absolutely be in the wheelhouse of what you all are all about.
Absolutely. But then too, we want to know about it before, because there's so much in the program. I kind of want to alert people, say, hey, these guys that were on a few weeks ago, they're running a LARP at Necronomicon. So get on that if you want to.
Yep, that would be it. All that sounds great, and thank you very much for having us. This has been really wonderful. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Sure. Well, usually we have more people here, but I think there's a bug going around. Pete's sick, and Ben wasn't feeling too well today either. I don't think so.
That's what they say. Yep,
that was me a couple weeks ago. So yeah, it's making its way towards you, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with your meeting.
Yep.
That'll be third one. It's a Sunday for me.
All right. Well, thanks, Tyler. Matt and Rick, thanks for being on the show too. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll probably see you next week, would be my guess. If not, for sure in 2 weeks. So thanks for listening, and good night.